Welcome back into episode 3 of the Canadian Fastbreak. As always, I'm your host, Brady Locke, joined alongside Jeremy Russo and another special guest appearance from Gianno Alosio. This week we have so much to talk about once again. Another big week in the CBO, and it felt like there was a lot of twists and turns. There were some teams that, we thought were down and out, clawing their way back, and there was a little bit of the opposite as well, teams falling down. But nonetheless, we are going to talk all of that this week, and we're actually going to have this as a bit of a feature episode on the Edmonton Stingers, as they have won their last 2 games and look to be right back in the picture perhaps, but we'll leave that for a little later on, and that is why we have Gianno here, because he knows all about the Stingers. He's going to give us a big rundown and what's really going on with them. But we're going to start things off. I'm going to swing it to you, Jeremy. What excited you this week in the CBO? Was there any game that stuck out to you?
This was kind of the week where the league turned into, I guess, the tables turning, for lack of a better metaphor. Right off the bat of the week, Tuesday, June 23rd, the Scarborough Shooting Stars taking their second loss against the Ottawa Blackjacks in a close-knitted game, 88-86. So if that didn't start the statement for the week, I don't know what else would have. After that, we're going to touch on the Edmonton Stingers taking on the Mamba in a 2-game series of the week, and we'll allude to that a little bit in the future. And then 96-86 win for Montreal Alliance as well too. So we're slowly seeing them creep their way up into the rankings, and I don't know if that's a shocker to you guys. It was to me when I refreshed the CEBL page, and their name popped up just a little bit past the middle of the pack there. So heavyweight matchup as well with Scarborough and Honey Badgers on Saturday. I guess we could have said it was heavyweights maybe a couple weeks ago, but now we see the Badgers on the decline with a loose 5 streak. So Scarborough was able to get their 11th win after that one. 11th win after that one. And then as well, the Sea Bears and the Bandits. That was the heaviest matchup on Saturday. Bandits coming out 94-88. And they're showcasing their depth like every conversation we've had about them before, you guys. So definitely a couple standout factors, but it's been a week of turntables, that's for sure.
Yeah, exactly like you just said, it really felt like some of these teams clawed their way back into it. Like we were almost kind of counting Ottawa out, and then there they go, win a game against the Scarborough Shooting Stars, giving them their second loss, and then again they beat the Niagara River Lions. Like there's so much with them to look at, but then again with the River Lions, we see them drop 2 this week, and we're now posing question marks if they are really going to get themselves back into it. And then again now the Brampton Honey Badgers with their 5th straight loss. The Alliance are now ahead of them in the standings. It's looking pretty crazy in the East. But again, we're going to be focusing more on the West here this episode, with those Edmonton Stingers getting those 2 big wins over the Mamba to put themselves right back in this playoff push. So, I'm going to send it to you, Gianno, now. How big were those 2 wins this week?
Yeah, they certainly felt pretty much as big as anybody probably expected them to be. I talked with Nick Hornsby post-game, and he talked about just how important this was. Some of his teammates said he stood up pre-game and mentioned, we need this one. I feel like that's pretty simple to sum it up about how, important these 2-game stretches were. This was a real opportunity for the Stingers to kind of shoot ahead and not end up, clinging to a 4 seed, because that's very well the situation they would have been in if they didn't come away with at least a sweep. I know we mentioned on the national rundown and, some of the Canadian Fastbreak, there was a deep need for this team to really come away with a good record out of this 3-game stretch against Winnipeg and Saskatoon. We've talked about they probably needed to go 3-0. I think they'll take the 2-1, but man, this was the turning point of the Edmonton Stingers season. If they did not win this, I really don't know if they make the playoffs. I don't know if they're, going into Canada Day with a actually good momentum around them. And, it starts to creep into you to see what is actually this team built around. Where's the star capability? And I think there's a lot of questions that got answered on Sunday with the ability to say, hey, we beat the team that's in the 3rd seed, and now you start looking at Edmonton and pushing the pace and being able to apply the pressure to Saskatoon to, keep going. And I think really the whole conversation around the West has kind of changed all of again. Just like it seems to be every single week, it feels like we have a new third seed or a new number one. So I definitely think those were pretty big wins for the Edmonton Stingers.
Yeah, I mean, to look at it, if they would have lost both of those, they're 4.5 back of the Mamba. Instead, it's a big swing. They're only half a game back now. But again, looking at the stats here, Nick Hornsby, 2 vintage performances, 30, 11, and 5, and then he had 25, 5, and 11, both back-to-back games. Like, man, how big was that? Is he proving himself, or had he already proved himself to be the leader on this team?
Yeah, I think the reputation really just kind of precedes Nick. He talked about it post-game too. He's just more familiar with the system because he's been here for so long. But he's also 31 now. He's been around the block. He is an Edmonton Stinger, right? When you think about Nick Hornsby, he is an Edmonton Stinger. And I think, it's starting to pay off a little bit more. Last year, I think many people were probably thinking, what's wrong with him? I don't think there was anything wrong with him. He was just behind Scotty, Keon Ambrose Hilton, and Shawnee's the second. And, this year they needed him more than they ever did. And right now he's putting up the numbers. He put up 30 last night on Sunday, and he got rewarded for it. He's the Booster Juice Player of the Week. Man, what else can you kind of ask for? Like, this guy is turning back the clock. He's kind of got that vintage Nick Hornsby performance. And all of a sudden, again, Edmonton may have found their offensive engine. And all of a sudden, we may also have that clutch player that they needed to. And we've been talking about so much about, we need somebody to kind of step up on this team to really give us an actual idea of what they can do in target time. And honestly, they're starting to answer more questions as the week go by. And that's something I definitely could not say 2 weeks ago when they lost to the Montreal Alliance.
Yeah, I mean, looking at it, like you just said, in the clutch time, it's so huge. And we were kind of a little bit, me personally, was a little bit weary on, did they have somebody they could go to? Was it, again, I was thinking maybe it was a committee thing. Maybe that still is. But again, looking at it, like you mentioned to me before we came on, you thought Davis Stanley was such a big part in that clutch time. He had 21 points last game. But again, what was he like in that game, seeing it live?
Just clutch. I think we called Miles Powell the Iceman. I think it might be, I think Stanley Davis Jr. might have a conversation to have that nickname. That guy was just lights out cold. Edmonton's seen so many of those close games as well, especially at home. To be able to be in front of your home crowd, there's 3 that I can count off the top of my head where it's like, it's the last shot and the team just, can't come through. Those games matter in the CBL, right? It's a sprint, 24 games. Every game you drop really matters when it comes to your playoff record. And I thought about that long and hard when I saw, Stanley Davis Jr. go up and take that layup and make the shot. Edmonton's been looking for that guy. And to be honest with you, he was not fazed by the moment when I asked him post-game about it. And that was a tough crowd. If you were there or if you were watching on TV, I hope it came through because I was there. And that was probably one of the loudest crowd pops I've heard over the past year and a half. Like, that team wanted the win. That crowd wanted the win because they understood how important the game was. And the Stingers were down in that. That's the crazy part. I think everybody I've seen people leaving in the beginning of the fourth quarter, and man, did they miss a game. Like, the game was not over at that point. I don't blame them for leaving, but now you kind of look back and you're like, yeah, it's like you probably should have stayed, but at the end of the day, that team was just, they needed that win. Stanley Davis Jr. was just so unfazed. He talked about it. He didn't seem fazed by the moment, and that's a veteran guy that you want to be able to hold the ball in those final moments, because to be honest with you, like we talked about, Brady, like, things were not going right with the by committee approach, and I think that's fair to say because you need a guy who you can just say, go get us 9 points and we're out of here, or even if you get us 6 or 7. That's a player you need by default in order to win games in the CBL. It's very hard not to. I think Edmonton found that out very early in the season. Now they've kind of got that answer, and all of a sudden this guy starts to look like the number 2 to Nick Hornsby. And obviously they've got Trey King in the mix too. It's starting to feel more like a team than it did probably, like I said, against Montreal. And there's just a certain momentum around this team that I'm like, this team feels different. You could tell from the tip-off, and it just feels like they're starting to put the pieces together.
Yeah, so, this team is looking a lot better. We see a lot of, guys coming forward. They're gelling more. But now I'm going to bring you in here, Jeremy. Looking at this team now, how can you kind of compare them to the bigger threats in the West at maybe those Bandits? How do you see them matching up against them? Are they, going to be a much tougher matchup now than maybe they were a week ago?
I mean, like, you look at the Bandits and you have all these star names, and I think with the Stingers you had those too, but every successful team, like, has a player that knows exactly who they are, and I think that fits what the Bandits are to the perfection, but I think that's the kind of stream that Edmonton's now slowly coming and trickling themselves down, and we see players like Hornsby like not just going and trying to be that guy, right? Like he's fitting in, he's trying to find a spot to fit in, and it's excelling the team towards the direction that they want to go. So compared to earlier on this season, I think not that they look like a completely different team, but maybe their motivation, maybe their mindset is completely different from when they started. They're on a roll now. They have some momentum, and now again, it's important that they grab that win on Canada Day, because that would be a devastating loss for the club, and devastating loss for momentum as well too. But just in comparison between then and now, yeah, they look completely different.
Yeah, I mean, like you just said there, going into this next big stretch of games, how important is it to, get this first Canada game and to get these, maybe steal a couple of these really tough games? I'll send it to you for that, Gianna.
Yeah, I think, Jeremy, you kind of hit the nail on the head. Like, if they go 3-0 and entering in that 5-game stretch that they have where they play Vancouver, Winnipeg, Vancouver, Scarborough, man, this conversation changes. Like, you want to be going into your best basketball of the season right then and there to play the CEVL's best. Like, those are the top 3 teams in the league, all in 5 games. And there's a real opportunity here for you to change the outlook of your season pretty much within a 10-day span. That also comes with the downside of if you lose the first one, that second game becomes all the more important because you don't want it to bleed into the next one.
Yeah.
The first 2 games, I believe, are 3 days. They're all in 3 days. So, I mean, that's a tough travel schedule. Getting back from Vancouver, that's going to be really something that I'm watching to say, how are the legs? Is the conditioning there? But that's also something I think you want to see out of a playoff team. This is going to be a sprint in the playoffs. We're going to have a 3-game best of finals. That's going to be important. The ability to turn it around because if I remember correctly, the finals is bang, bang, bang from the date from what I remember. It's going to be a tight turnaround. So I think that this is also a nice chance to see, how are they going to react to quick travel? How are they going to react to being able to play some of the league's best in back-to-back nights and where they're kind of at. But I think, staying with the point here, there's an immense opportunity for them to really, take a stride and be able to shoot up the rankings, really. This could put them in the top 3 situation. This could put them at the top 3 seed and in the league, to be honest with you. And I think there's also something to be said. If you go into that with a 3-0 record, which they should because they should beat Calgary, this is definitely something that you start to put this team on the watch and you start to say, okay, this is going to be the next 5 games. You do not want to miss that if you're a Stingers fan.
Yeah, so I mean, now breaking this down as a team a little bit further, we beat the Mamba. We're going into these next few games against, those higher ranked teams. Looking at the Stingers, they've pretty much lead the league in turnovers per game with around 15. They give up, the most fouls per game and have the least drawn, so there's a discrepancy there. But again, we've talked about their defensive issues. They did shoot 25% from 3 last game. There could be something there, maybe not. But my question to you is, what do you think is the biggest key to this team that they need to, implement and fix going into these games against those better teams?
Yeah, it's 100% the defense, and I think, Jeremy, you'd probably agree with this too. Like, you can't be giving up the most points in the league in the last 5 games and expect to win very many, basketball games, especially when you're going up against the very best. I look at the fact of, the top 4 best teams on defense are really starting to become the top 4 teams in the league. Defense wins championships, man, and this team needs to learn that. I think they're starting to get a better grip on things. I think, maybe it's just a factor of teams, just not being able to, maybe the teams just have figured out the Stingers, schemes and what they want to do against them. But I think for me, this thing that stands out is defense. This team can't be giving up that many points. I think you're right. I think they are giving up 100 points a game in their last 5. That really can't happen because if you want to win basketball games, you need to feel a little bit more comfortable scoring, in the 90s. And they're scoring 92 points per game right now in their last 5. That's why they didn't have the greatest record. I think that there's something to be said about, trying to find the defensive groove. I think that starts against Calgary. I think there's a great opportunity. There really is no better opportunity, in my opinion, to be able to go up against, the team that's dead last and try to fix your defensive woes before you start getting into this. But, I want to send it over to Jeremy and ask his opinion, talking about the 3-point percentage and all that stuff. What's kind of standing out to you, Jeremy?
Yeah, I mean, you can win a game with 25% shooting from three like once. Are you going to win a playoff series with it? That's the question, right? And it's about finding that consistency. We've been saying it all season long, right? But when it boils down to playoff time, the biggest thing, the reason why you win is one, defense, and one B is so that you're reworking yourself and your roster to beat that specific team in your playoff format. And that's consistently what Edmonton's going to have to face off against. And if they reckon that, the Stingers aren't even hitting their threes, it's going to be much easier to shut them down and then transition over to the offense on their opponent's side of the court, right? So, I just think the Stingers need to find a way to be able to get that number up, obviously, or reckon that find another way to win. You're not going to win that way, and you're not going to win a playoff series that way either.
Yeah, so kind of actually to stay with you there for a sec, Jeremy, the River Lions, they have the most points given up per game. Bandits are actually the second. So although they give up the second most points, they also lead the league in points scored, by a pretty big margin. With a game coming up against them soon, and we know that this Stingers team can score, so that's probably not the issue, but, having to play a team that scores the most points in the league and your defense being a little shaky, what can the Stingers do to neutralize the Bandits' offense a little bit?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing with Bandits is the fact that they're able to find that workaround. If you stick them with any single team in the league right now in a playoff series, they'll try to find a way, and you'll see that they'll try to find a way to attempt to win or gain some wins or advantages or edges over their opponents, right? So Edmonton needs to take a page out of the Bandits' books, whatever they do, right? And they, in similar sense, they need to try to find a way to kind of mimic that game strategy as well, too.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, to me, very interesting that I feel like these two teams could almost match up pretty well, considering that the Bandits, give up quite a bit of points, so the offense shouldn't be the issue. If you could focus on that defense, I think you got a real shot at taking the Bandits down for sure. But again, moving forward here, looking at the players, looking at a guy like Tay Donald, I want to send it to you, Gianno. I've watched some clips of him recently, back in his U Sports days. He seemed like he could handle the ball so well. He was an electric guy to get to the rim and could really shoot the three well. What does he bring to the Stingers that, kind of stands out?
Yeah, I think the first thing is that it's really hard to find good Canadian guards and really keep them. I think Tay Donald has done a really good job of that, obviously. Not only just being Canadian, and helping out with the ratio stuff, but also being able to have, a guy who can score. A lot of the times, the things he does just don't even show up on the stat sheet. There's times where this guy just gets a ball, right? He maybe and just impacts the play in the little things, and I think that's why he's been really trusted in the rotation, because over the past 2 years, he didn't have the greatest stats, to be plain honest with you. But there's a reason why he's here. And I think, that's what Coach Baker saw, is that it's a lot of just he plays hard. Like, there's not a single time where you can look at this guy and he's taking a play off. He plays hard. He's a tough competitor. A lot of people may also look at his size, and he's not a tall point guard, but he doesn't play like it. And that's the thing I always like to point out, is that sometimes people can say, okay, maybe this guy's too small to succeed, but I like to think there's a reason why these players are here. There's a reason why they've made it this far, and this guy just continues to impress me, really, match after match. He's been popping off last night. He had a great performance on Sunday. It just continues to impress me. He wasn't in the starting five, but him and Mason Bossier they kind of keep flipping. Whether that's just a matchup thing, or whether they're testing the waters out, you never know. But I think that there's definitely something to be said that Tay Donald is a guy that this team can rely on. He's also becoming a good bench piece, to be honest with you, and the fact that being a Canadian, I like to say, like, that helps your team build a good roster. The ability to bring in import players for any position, because you need to have two Canadians on the floor at every time. That kind of brings some stability to know, okay, you got one taken care of. Maybe if you get another two, then that's three left, right? Like, there's just some stability and easy roster construction that kind of works, because there is only so many good Canadian players that can play in this league, and then also, the ability to sign them against all the competition. When you get a player like that, it really helps your team, build out to be, honestly, really successful.
Yeah, I mean, they have, like you just said, they play heavy minutes with 4 of their 5 Americans, Hornsby, Stanley, King, and Lindsay. They play pretty heavy minutes. So
Yeah.
looking at it, Donald, Bandamel, Borsier, like you mentioned, those are 3 guys that, got to find a way to contribute when they're on the floor. So,
Yeah.
but my thought, honestly, here is that there's just a lot of, explosive bucket getters. I feel like there's a lot of great individual play there, and I think they're starting to find their chemistry. But again, if they can find that, their ceiling, to me, feels pretty high. But we've seen it. If they don't find it, it could be pretty low, right? So my, question over to Jeremy is, do you think the Stingers have the potential to put it all together, put all their chemistry together, and what things can they do to, really gel?
Yeah, I think one of those things is what Gianno just alluded to. Donald, he's a guard, and you mentioned that he's a smaller individual guard, right? But I always love the smaller individual. Those are the guys on the roster that are constantly looking to improve themselves and get better for the team. So, he's not just a passer. You get him inside the paint. If you stop, you back off. He finds a way to score on the outside as well, too. So definitely a big contributing factor. But with Edmonton, it's also like we've been saying, the defense has to be consistent. And if they start shooting closer to the potential that they have on the 3 line, the team looks like a team that could heading towards playoffs, and the talent is there. It's just about putting it together every single night. And I think we had a really good analysis at the beginning of the season, because that's what we were saying too. It just looked like the strings weren't attached, and if they can find a way to sever them back together again, then I think they have a perfect pedigree of championship level team.
Yeah, I mean, now really looking at it all, I think we've kind of put it all together. I kind of want to get your guys' thoughts on where this team really could go this season. Are we now looking at a potential better than 3 seed? Because I know we were looking last week and we were like, maybe 3rd seed isn't even in the question, but are we looking maybe now at 2, maybe even at 1? What is this team's ceiling? I'll send it to you, Gianno, first.
Yeah, I think, if you would have asked me this question last week, I would have said it's 4 seed or bust at this point. Yeah. That conversation has changed. I think the big thing that I keep pointing out, this team just feels a little bit different, and I don't know if it's necessarily you can point to, a specific player maybe doing something better or not being there. It's really just, I think the entire team really felt like it just wasn't clicking. That Montreal game probably was one of the worst moments in Stingers franchise history. I don't think that's necessarily taking a limb out there. I've never seen a game that went so wrong against a team that really they could have won against on paper. I think that was probably one of the lowest moments of the franchise, and I think that it just kind of highlighted just something wasn't working. But over the past, on this road trip, something clicked, something worked, and something happened. I don't know if it was that loss in Winnipeg, if it was going into that Mamba game. I don't know what happened, but something happened. And whatever it was, it really just worked. And I know it's only 2-0, and, if they lose on Canada Day to Calgary, that maybe this conversation changes. But I feel like this team just feels different. Before I was thinking, okay, are we even going to be able to get into a situation where we're going to be, playing better than teams? I really didn't know if that was going to be a possibility after that Montreal game. I feel like I'm starting to feel more optimistic about their chances that, if they even do get to the point where, they are 3-0, I could realistically see them going 4-1 on that 5-game stretch. And that's not what I'd project them to be. I'd project them to be at 3-2, but there's something that happened with this team that makes me think they're a contender. Whether that was a mentality thing, whether it was Nick Hornsby, getting back into the starting 5, I don't know. There's just something that I don't think you can pinpoint. It was just maybe it's a collection of smaller things, or maybe the whole group just kind of had something of an awakening. But I'm really interested to see where this team starts to perform at. But I'd put them at the 2nd seed. I think to make a long point short, I think they're at the 2nd seed. I think Jordan Baker said post game, he still thinks this team wants to host a playoff game. They want to do it. They want to make sure that they're not on the road as a 4th seed. And I think, to be honest with you, they're very well on their way to doing that if they keep this up.
Yeah, I mean, well, at this point, I wouldn't be surprised if this league completely flipped on its head once again. Nothing surprises me anymore. So, Stingers first doesn't really feel that crazy, but also Stingers last could, end up happening again, right? So yeah. There's so many things that could change, but again, I'm going to send it to you, Jeremy. What do you think of the odds of the, like Gianna just said, the Stingers hosting a playoff game?
Yeah, I mean, like, the biggest thing in sports is the transference of momentum, right? And I don't know, maybe call this a far-fetched theory, but at the same time, you see a couple weeks back, the Mamba able to take a win against the Scarborough Shooting Stars. In turn, afterwards, the Edmonton Stingers are able to win 2 games against the Saskatoon Mamba, the same club that beat the club that is currently 11-2. So I don't know if there was any transference of momentum, like I was saying earlier there, but I like to think so, that the club realizes that they beat a club, that is on the same level as, or maybe not on the same level, but on the same championship, I guess, for lack of a better term. You guys have you know what I mean. They're just like, they're able to beat the Scarborough Shooting Stars and then in turn transfer that momentum, and I think it's bringing them forward. But then you see also at the same time seed 3 and 4, it's so closely knit together, and then seed 1 and 2 with the Bandits and the Sea Bears also closely knit together. So I don't want to say that the battle is too tight to get up to the first seed, but I do think that the Bandits and Sea Bears are going back and forth right now, and I think the West is starting to clutter up as the trend progresses, and also, so I think it's going to be the Stingers and Mamba fighting for that third.
I agree with that. I want to jump in here too because obviously I feel like there's been a big shift. Obviously, we talked about the Mamba before last episode, and shout out the Saskatoon Mamba because they've turned their season around. This team honestly is just I projected them to not be very good, and to be honest with you, I will eat my words. They're doing very well, and I still don't think it's out of the question that they still end up as a 3rd seed. I think that this team's just really, they found their groove, and I don't think many people did. And, you talked about that Scarborough game. That was probably it. That kind of turned their season around. Although we probably didn't know it at the time, but the Paw Patrol jerseys may have been the saving grace for the Saskatoon Mamba this season. That could be its own episode. But yeah, I think, that's the big thing I'm taking away from this too, right, is I still wonder about, who's really stronger in the West or the East. I think we'll figure that out very soon. But, I want to flip this back to Brady because, Brady, you had it. You called the Edmonton Stingers being able to kind of get back on the wagon here and being able to figure things out. Why don't you give us your thoughts? Because you kind of saw this. I wouldn't say when people were doubting them, but you saw this when maybe, there wasn't as much vision and hope for that to happen.
I certainly did. I saw it at a time that, wasn't, exactly like this. I saw it a couple weeks ago and I thought, hey, maybe we're going to get back to 500. They didn't. They did go on a bit of a losing streak and I was kind of, weary, right? Mm-hmm. But then they come out this week. It feels like they've flipped the switch. It feels like they're back and it feels like they've found an identity. And that's something I've harped on, through this entire season is that you need to find your identity in the CBO. And the Stingers, their identity may very well be Hornsby, teaching these guys what to do, leaning on them and them leaning on Hornsby. So it's Davis Stanley coming out and being incredibly clutch. It's Tate Donald, finding his groove, proving that he can be a great player on this stage because we very well know that he was a stud in U Sports. And then looking at it as well, if Bandamel can really find his footing, all these guys, it just feels like they have a lot of pieces, right? And, looking at teams, you got to have pieces, right? And the Stingers definitely have pieces. That isn't the question. The question is, again, the defense. One thing I would like to see is maybe they bring in, a better big maybe to be a better, defensive, cornerstone. I don't know, but that's probably my only question mark with them right now, and I'm very happy to see that they have found, an offensive identity, and that's probably the best thing you could do at this point, right? Mm-hmm. So, again, looking at them, looking at the Mamba, the biggest thing, and this is something that I think the Mamba have figured out, is confidence. They have the confidence night in and night out that they can beat any team in this league, and they've shown that. They've beat Sea Bears, Shooting Stars, and now I think the Stingers are hopefully going to kind of get that from them. They've now beat the Mamba again twice, but what they need to now do is go into this week and do what the Mamba have done and beat those good teams. Now, after this week, I'm really going to be interested to see if, we're at a point where I can confidently say that they've beaten these good teams and I can, back up everything we've just said. But again, this is still early, and as much as I don't want to overreact, I really want to give them their props still. But again, if they can take down some of these bigger teams, I'm honestly looking at the Stingers to be, pushing that top 4 in this CBL right now. So
I like that.
That is kind of my thought there, to be honest with you. But moving, kind of towards the end of this episode, looking forward now, what do we kind of see happening this week? What are we looking forward to? And now this is just in general in the CBL instead of the Stingers. What are we looking forward to this week? I'll start with you, Jeremy. Yeah.
Yeah, no worries. I don't know. It's just kind of what I alluded to earlier. You see the Western Conference just tighten up, and we kind of spoke about it in the past couple of weeks, the imbalance of the two conferences. And I feel like this has been the Western Conference's opportunity to kind of showcase that, hey, we've still been here the whole time. Maybe we've had a slower roll, but nonetheless, So again, you see the 3rd and 4th seed getting fought after, and position 1 and 2 also getting fought after. So we have no clue if these are going to stay stagnant or, we're going to see the Stingers on top of the Sea Bears in a matter of a week or two, right? So it just goes to show, I know we've been saying it every single podcast episode, but how quickly these standings can mold. And I'm excited to see how quick, I guess, the Western Conference divides and tightens.
Well, yeah, like I just said, this week, I think, even looking at this in a generic sense, I think this is, again, one of the biggest weeks for the Stingers, right? They have the Surge, and then they have, it's pretty back-to-back, 1 day difference in between, Bandit Stingers and then Sea Bear Stingers. So this is a giant week, and I think it's a giant week in more so the Western Conference, right? There's so much movement that can happen. But again, I'm really looking forward to seeing what the Stingers do this week. Gianna, what do you think?
Yeah, I think, to be honest with you, you're bang on. But the one thing that's kind of caught my eye, obviously, because I do cover the Blackjacks, I think that there is some real possibility here that Ottawa does end up being the 2nd seed very soon, too, because they play Brampton on Thursday, July 2nd. They did not get a Canada Day game, but they were 6-8, and Brampton is 7-6. Do you think about how important that game is? This could very well end up being the game that decides 2nd. The entire East is really, I think it's separated by a game and a half from 2nd all the way to 5th. So just as much as Brampton was kind of running away with it of being, a 2nd seed, all of a sudden things have shifted. I also looked at the fact that the Blackjacks played Niagara again. The Honey Badgers play Scarborough again. There's so many things where we're going to look at it to be okay, what's really going to happen? And even, not looking too far out, but July 8th, there's the Alliance and the Blackjacks again. All of a sudden, it's starting to feel like there's conversation again. And these games in the East, I mean, to be honest with you, you're not going to want to lose any of them. They play each other so much. If I remember correctly, Ottawa plays all Eastern Conference opponents until their final 2 games. Wow. That means it's just going to be who makes less mistakes. Yeah. If you make 1 or 2 less turnovers, maybe that is the difference between the 4th seed and you sitting from the sidelines come, first week of August. That is how small the margin of error is going to be, because all of these teams are right there with each other and they're all going to be playing each other. That it literally may come down to a tiebreaker. It may also come down to literally a win that is decided by 1 point, or it might come down to a win that was, given away by a last-second turnover or a last-second missed shot. That's how close I think the East is going to be. So, wrapping things up on my end, I think that's the thing I'm watching for. The entire playoff picture in the East is going to be thrown into a blender over the next week or two.
Yeah, I mean, you hit it again. I think as much as I just said the West is good, the East is going to be just as good. So, it's a big week for the entire league for sure. But I think what I honestly want to end this with and wrap up is I'm going to get your predictions on the 3 Stingers games this week. What record do we think that they have coming out of this week? I'll start with you, Jeremy. Are they 3-0, 2-1, 1-2, or are they going to go 0-3?
Yeah, I think with just the roll that they're on right now, I'd like to say that they go at least above 500. So I'm going to say right now 2-1. I like the momentum that they have against the Mamba. But yeah, you can't count the Surge out. That's for sure. And a lot of times clubs get caught, I guess, unexpectedly against the less favorites, the underdogs, right? So those are the games you have to watch out for. And the Stingers are going to have to do exactly that.
Okay. I like that.
Gianna, I like that. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think one of the things that not many people are going to realize is that the Surge have been off for almost a week going into that Canada Day game. That's going to mean something, because not only did Edmonton play on the Sunday, sure, that's 2 days rest, I'm really looking at it to be that's a difference maker. That could be the wild card in the thing that separates a game, in the fourth quarter. But looking out of that, I'm still probably taking Edmonton in that 9 times out of 10. The thing that really worries me after that game is the fact that, they have a day off on the 2nd, and they're going to be traveling to Langley, Vancouver, right? Most likely because they have a game on the Friday. They're probably gonna make it on the 2nd. So you're traveling that day. You play Vancouver. That's a late game. That's an 8:00 Mountain Time start. And remember, like, the Stingers are in Mountain Time, so that means they'll probably be done at like 10. Probably pushing it into 11 their time, but obviously they'll have an extra hour. But just their circadian rhythm, like that's gonna mean a difference. I think then that pushes you into traveling on the Saturday, and you're flying back to Edmonton. I know it's not a long flight, but flying sucks, to be honest with you. And when you're playing all that basketball, it's gonna kind of wear on you a little bit when you're flying 2 days out of the 3. Then you come back and you play Winnipeg at home. Like, that's going to be a big game, and to be honest with you, you also don't have very much time to recover. Like, that's a 4:00 start local. Like, this is really going to be the test right here, is how can their bodies hold up. If they do very well with the travel, I think it'll be a little bit, they may have things in their momentum, but like, this is a challenge. It's not going to be handed to them, and that's what I'm really excited about, is if they find a way to win these games, like, they have to be given times 2 respect, just because of the situation of back against the wall, and you're put up against some weird travel, and to be honest with you, that's what I'm really looking at. So to end it off, I think they're going to go 2-1. I think they're going to drop one of those games, and to be honest with you, I have a feeling that is going to be that Winnipeg game. I just feel like that's just too much travel for me. I think that something's just going to go wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I actually love the point that you bring up there. I think this is one of those situations where it's like, the game, you kind of have to worry about the game that's not even the game, right? It's the outside factors that, could play a bigger part in what actually happens in the outcome. So that's going to be very interesting to see. I think, we really have to look at that as well as what happens in the game. But I think we did a tremendous job breaking down the Stingers here. I want to thank you for coming on, joining us, me and Jeremy here for episode number 3. We definitely look forward to having you on again. But again, make sure you all come back to next week, where me and Jeremy will be breaking down either another team, maybe players, or maybe just the league in general. We'll have the best storylines, but stay tuned to this, North of the End Zone, and the National Rundown, where Off the Line is bringing you the best coverage out there. So make sure you stay tuned, and we will see you next week.